Hello, everyone. This is Mark Askelson, President of Compliance Group. Thank you for joining us for our free education series. Today, we're going to be talking about compliance as a solution, cybersecurity for MSPs. We are very happy or very excited that this particular event is endorsed or brought to you by Axient eFolder. We have Tom Watson, VP of MSP Best Practices, and Angus Robinson, the Chief Marketing Officer. You guys want to say hello to everybody?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mark.
Sure. Go ahead, Angus.
Sure, this is Angus. So I'll give a quick overview of Axient eFolder. We're very proud to have brought together the best-in-class business continuity solution. This includes Replicate and also BRC for backup and disaster recovery. Then we also have Anchor for cloud enabling your file servers, so taking those on-premise file servers into the cloud. And of course, Cloud Finder for Office 365 backup. And we do all of this through our Axient Cloud through 5 nines availability and ongoing protection. So Tom, with that, I'll hand things to you.
Thanks, Angus. Yes, my name's Tom Watson, and I got to know Mark, CEO of the Compliance Group, while on the road recently, at various trade shows, and had some great conversations. I run a program here called MSP Ignition out of Axient. And my purpose is to bring best practices to MSP owners. I owned an MSP for 15 years back east and sold it successfully 4 years ago. And now I have a great job where I help bring that knowledge to others. And I'm always looking for what's the next thing. And Mark and I really hit it off because I told him about all the years when I ran an MSP and I took on very limited amounts of healthcare work. As a matter of fact, I would do a small piece of it and make sure I understood just that, but that I wasn't going outside of certain bounds where I felt like HIPAA might be a threat to me. And I did that because I didn't have a source of education, a way to document. I didn't have policies and procedures that had been laid out for me and a plan to follow. So when I started looking at what Mark was doing at the Compliance Group, I realized that this is a great resource for MSPs. A lot of MSPs still are not aware of that this is out here. And if you're an MSP, you've got to pay attention to healthcare. It is the fastest growing segment of the market, and it's a way to make money. And it's not as hard as you think when you have a company like the Compliance Group to help lead you. And with that, Mark, I'll pass it to you.
Awesome, and thank you so much. Because listen, guys, I really do appreciate. And Tom was a lot of fun running. Actually, the actual time we met with some crazy client was trying to talk my ear off, and Tom and I were like, "Oh my Lord, this MSP is insane." But okay, so what we are going to talk about today. By the way, as we're going through this, please do ask questions. Either we'll answer them as we go through them, or definitely at the end we'll make sure to take time. But please, this is meant to be fun and interactive. I think some of this will be new or different information. Some of this is just good common sense stuff that you folks are already doing with your business. But we will hopefully make it interesting. So, Compliance Group, for those of you who are not familiar with us, think of us as we're like QuickBooks, but for compliance. You know, one of the challenges that most people, and I think Tom was illustrating or articulating a very common problem, right? A lot of the tools that exist were built for us as auditors, but they don't help the end client solve their problem. And if there's anything at the end of today's, let's say, webinar, we're very passionate about what is HIPAA or healthcare, but just specializing in a vertical and bringing a solution to your client rather than services is in itself a great message. So we are endorsed. We are a little different in the MSP space in that we are the endorsed solution for the majority of healthcare specialties. So whether it's eye care, dermatology, or anesthesiology, many of the Self-Insurance Association, the emergency services groups, most of those folks are the end specialties or the vendors that serve them, such as a lot of the SaaS providers, use our technology or endorse our technology. I got involved with what is MSPs about 3 years ago. I am currently the chair of what's called the Business Application Advisory Council. So I am very passionate about trying to find ways to work with vendors. This is why Axient and ourselves are on this call today, to give you better tool sets to deliver greater value ultimately to your clients. So if we were in a big room, I'd put this up and I'd have you all raise your hands, right? And it starts off with, when we're talking to a room of MSPs, you're all very tech savvy. So there's not much I'm going to be able to teach you, but I can talk about from a business perspective how we can potentially help you. So normally what happens is, are you interested in new clients, growing the recurring revenue you currently have, or just getting better profitability? And really, when we talk a little deeper into what is compliance, the first thing that comes up is a whole set of concerns. This is hard to sell. Is it going to increase my liability? Hey, I really know security well, but there's this privacy and administrative stuff. It's not my thing. Would I have to hire new people? And the reality is no to all of those. Okay? This can actually be easy. In the end, you're going to find out that actually HIPAA compliance by law actually justifies your security services. Okay. As far as the rest of this, let me kind of give you a little education, and I think you'll feel very different about it. So first off, I'm a big believer in, if you are offering services to your client, right, it's too easy for them to ask somebody else, hey, can you give me an Office 365 license? Okay, it's too easy for them to say, hey, I can get it for, X dollars for one person and a dollar less, I'm switching my business. But when you start talking about what is solutions, so like I said, we are passionate about healthcare, and I'll talk a little bit more why as we go through this presentation. But by focusing on that, you're really specializing, and now you're addressing a client's problem, not just the symptoms or just a couple of different services, but the thing that's keeping them up at night. Now, what you'll find as I go through this, HIPAA really does justify security services. It is actually the way the law is written, literally sells this thing for you. Okay, so ultimately, I'm going to talk about how you can increase your MRR and differentiate your firm. A lot of folks are looking for, hey, how do I be stickier? How do I gain business? How do I, how do I make my firm more valuable in the market and to my clients? And I would say specialization is a big part of that. Ultimately, remember, HIPAA is a law. Okay, your clients, and in many cases, you have to do this. Okay, failing to do it can cost you not just fines; it can cost you your business. So let me talk about the benefits of it, not let's say the downside. So first of all, why healthcare? Okay, little known to most folks, but healthcare, the industry of healthcare, is the fastest growing sector in the American economy. Okay, it represents 26% of our GDP, which means 1 out of every 4 businesses you come across is in healthcare. Okay. Now, it is also the healthcare, especially SMB healthcare, small and mid-sized businesses, is the most vulnerable group and the most attacked group as far as ransomware goes. So if you think of all the value prop you're trying to speak to folks, healthcare means if you are talking to a healthcare client, 88% of ransomware is aimed just at them. Okay. Now, another thing that I think is important when I'm talking to MSPs is, healthcare is not just your doctor's office. It is especially not just a dentist, okay? And I know MSPs have a lot of concentration in dentists, but in the hierarchy of the 80-some-odd medical specialties that exist, dentists are kind of like the low guy on the totem pole, okay? They tend to be cheaper. They tend to be cost sensitive, and they most of the time are not particularly into advanced technology. Now, you start talking to an ophthalmological surgeon at an ambulatory surgical center and 5 locations, trust me, he or she is going to care a lot about the technology, and they view it as a differentiator. Okay, so right off the bat, not all covered entities or doctor offices are the same. You really want to be making sure you're talking to the ones that are more in, let's say more into how to impress their what they would call a patient, which I would call a consumer. The other part of healthcare, almost 2/3 of healthcare, is actually the vendors who serve them. Lawyers, accountants, billing firms, answering services, shredding companies. And, by the way, any MSP on this call, that if you have one client that is in healthcare, you got to be HIPAA compliant. Okay, so it's a much larger market than you realize. Now, often you hear people say, you may have spoken to 3-4 years ago, you asked somebody, and they said, I'm not worried about HIPAA, no one's enforcing it. Well, here's what happened. The law changed at the end of 2013, so that there was a 2-year grace period, and right now enforcement is up 400%. And although when I first made this deck, the the national failure rate was 70% or higher, the last set of reports coming out of what is HHS, or Health and Human Services, these are the HIPAA auditors, is that it is currently a 94% failure rate. Most common objection, which we're going to talk about, is they did a security risk assessment through an IT provider, but failed to do the rest. Now, if you don't believe me, if you look at, let's say, Channel E2E or CRN, top 100 MSPs in the market, their number one vertical is healthcare. Okay, so this is a hot market. Don't let it go. Now, the first thing I like to talk about is what we all think of security, right? And we start getting very techie because we're all tech geeks on this call, right? But in reality, to your client, and this is an important lesson to learn, okay? To your average client, they don't think of security as anything to do with the technology. We make that mistake of bringing it up. What they asked for, which is, an Oxford Dictionary, is I want to be safe. I have anxiety, I have fear, and I am willing to pay a pretty penny to somebody who can make that fear go away. Okay, and that's really what you're delivering. So try to slow yourself down on getting into the deep into the tech, and more into what is keeping you up at night. What is preventing you from growing your business? What are the things that are that are slowing you down? And what you're going to find is they're not going to say, "I need a dark web scan." Okay, what they're going to say is, I'm nervous about this. I'm afraid, a friend of mine, he lost his business because. Those are the things that they're going to be focusing on. So, good news, bad news. If for all the great tech work that we as an industry are doing, unfortunately, 76% of the major breaches or the substantive breaches still happened, okay? And they were almost always caused by things that you couldn't control. Lost devices, phishing attacks, staff disabling features. Matter of fact, one of the things I find kind of entertaining, okay, is that, CompTIA reported at an international, they surveyed everybody, 26% of the time, it was somebody in the IT department that either failed to follow a policy or procedure, or basically they turned something off or forgot to turn something on. Now, the other thing I find scary, and you guys probably hear this objection a lot when you're talking to your clients, is how many people really do believe, okay, that what they have in place is good enough. Okay, it's the number one mistaken issue. All right, many people really believe that whatever they got in place that they've done enough to protect themselves. Unfortunately, as I think we can all attest to, with the rate of ransomware attacks, hacking attacks, phishing scams, all the different tech things that are going on in today's world, you are not as safe as you think you are, right? And that's why they need you guys. So in healthcare, one of the other big misunderstandings that I hear from people is they'll say, well, we did a security risk assessment and we've done all these great tech things. I'm like, awesome. You do realize that a HIPAA auditor will never come in and ask for, give me a copy of your network scan. Okay? They're gonna look at you and say, prove to me you made a good faith effort. And I'll talk more about what a good faith effort is. But a little bit of a gift to you guys is, if you're not familiar with the OCR wall of shame, every breach or incident that has ever occurred is public record. You can go in and look it up. And any investigation over the last 24 months is also there. Okay? So you can actually go in and find out exactly what's going on in your territory, whether it was the business associate, whether it was a cover entity, whether it was a hacking incident, a lost device, email. You actually can see all the details. Now, what you'll find, to kind of jump forward a little bit, good news from our perspective is you're going to find that the fines always revolve around three issues. Failure to do the correct risk assessments. You guys did a fantastic job. Client asked for a security risk assessment. You did it. The problem is there's 4 other audits that are required under the law. 2, you did great. You assessed where the risks are. You advised them to do something, but they don't have policies and procedures to fix that. Okay, and particularly on the administrative side. I'll give you some real world examples of where administrative didn't do the trick. Okay, last thing is the issue of business associate agreements, and I'll talk more about this, but failing to have a business associate agreement in place is the third most common issue for fines, and even in the smallest of cases, you're talking a couple $100,000 for each one. Officially, last year, the average fine was $1.5 million. Okay, so anybody who says I don't have to worry about it, I don't know about you, most businesses I don't think can handle $1.5 million shot. Now, whether it's Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, FBI, what you find is if you look at every major breach or incident that has occurred, and think about the ones you guys have handled at your clients' offices, it always comes back to either there wasn't a policy or procedure or someone failed to follow it. Okay, that's every single time that you can go back into it. So if you look at and this is a great example of where Axient's tool sets come in. The number one thing that can protect you in the case of a ransomware is backup disaster recovery. Second thing is employee training. So, the two organizations on the phone call here today, this is really, we're your top, let's say, areas of defense. Now, Tom, did you want to add some more stuff about Axient products in this arena?
Yeah, well, what I'm looking at here is I think that a lot of MSPs out there are not fully protecting themselves from ransomware. And the best way you can do that is you need solutions that are taking images of that. You can't rely on Windows servers and that type of rollback, that rollback ability. You really need a quality file sync and share and backup solution where you can turn that stuff back and remove that and go back to a previous date and time with that data and pull it up. As you can see here, it's number one for backup and disaster recovery, BDR, but also employee training at number two. And that's my big thing when I owned an MSP is if you're going to be involved in compliancy, you need to go out there and find another service that can provide that training for you to make sure they're up to speed.
And guys, hey, listen, it's a financial opportunity for you. So, that's another thing. You want to be making money. Okay, so we're not going to go deep into HIPAA law here, folks, but I do think you need to understand the basics. And this is another one of those areas where we see a lot of misunderstandings. Okay? So, first off, your client's a covered entity is responsible for what's called the privacy rule. That's how they talk to their patients. That's easy. But the area that I see most people get tangled is your client or you presume that the solving the security rule was the technical audit, okay, or your SRA. That's not, well, although that represents 2 of the required 6 audits, and it is really important. Because you'll hear me speak in many sessions, you can't be compliant unless you're secure, and you can't be secure unless you're compliant. Okay, it's just the way it is. Now, the most common thing here is that your client is asking for something called meaningful use macro MIPS. But remember, when that's not a law. That was an incentive program to deploy electronic health records. HIPAA is the law and has been so since 1996. So HIPAA always required that audit. It was just added to what was when macro MIPS was rolling out. Said, oh, by the way, since we're paying you $44,000 per doctor to put this electronic thing in, we just want to make sure you do a quick security risk assessment. We want to make sure we got a copy of it. Okay, and that's the requirement every year. By the way, you are coming into SRA season. For those of you who are on this call, this is the hot time. Okay, because most of the organizations are going to be saying that they need to reattest in the 4th quarter. Okay, now what I will make a plug for what is for Axient and Compliancy Group. It's a great opportunity for you to do a hell of a lot more in the security risk assessment. There's a lot more material. There's a lot more solution you can provide for them. Now, the other areas of audits, there's 4 of them, are physical, administrative, and privacy audits. So those, by the way, those 6 audits are mandated and need to be done every year. Okay, so this is a gift that keeps on giving. Now, the omnibus rule is the thing that kind of got interesting. Okay, and this is why so many of us are seeing a growth in compliance right now, is this law changed at the end of 2013. Okay, it had a 2-year grace period. So through 15, 16, and then ultimately to 17 is when they first started doing enforcement, and that's why you're just beginning to see the growth in fines. It said 2 things. Any breach or incident that occurs must be investigated, and if it's a meaningful breach, more than 500 people potentially affected, must be reported within 60 days. If it is less than that, got to be reported at the end of the year. Now, why that's so important is what was a trouble ticket to you could be a federal violation that can be a $475,000 fine for your client if they fail to report. Okay, and that's the kind of differentiator that you can get. Hey, this is important. I'm going to be worrying about your business. The other components of the omnibus rule have to do with business associates. Now, one of the things that we did the wall of shame, if you were to look at the details of that, 30% of the incidences that occur, or the breaches, were caused by the vendor. So why omnibus is in effect and why this matters to every one of the people on this call, because if you have a single healthcare client, you got to be HIPAA compliant, okay? Your lawyer, your accountant, your answering services, your billing services, everybody's got to be HIPAA compliant. Why? Because that's been the big breach in the market. Now, for your clients, that means two things. A business associate agreement, pretty straightforward, okay? It also means that the client must prove that they did what's called a technical due diligence, okay? It's another opportunity for you as an MSP to say, look, you need to make sure, I'm going to help you make sure that billing firm you're using is secure. Okay, it's an opportunity for you to charge, differentiate, and then ultimately, perhaps even get that billing firm to sign on with you as another client. Okay, now that's the end of the lesson for today. If you are a glutton for punishment, this is the technical definitions of the 6 required audits. One thing to be aware of. Some of the language overlaps, right? A high-tech subtitle Part D, privacy self-audit, it sounds an awful lot like a privacy audit under the privacy rule, but they're not. They're actually 3 different audits, even though they have similar names. Same thing with security, the asset and device manual audits. So it's easy for your clients to be confused, and I think honestly it's a little bit easy for us as vendors in the market to kind of glom them all together. Now, ultimately, one of the reasons why I think HIPAA law has been complicated for IT providers, okay, is that it's a gray law. And what I mean by a gray law is it is not, it was designed as a law to satisfy everything from a small single location with 5 employees or 5 computers, the largest of hospitals with 500 locations and 5,000 employees, and everybody in between, software providers, IT organizations, etc. But in the end, it always comes down to proof of a good faith effort. Okay, that's what you get fined for, is not being able to prove you made a good faith effort. Now, if you're to read the 7 fundamental elements of an effective compliance program, this is the federal guidance. The Office of Inspector General and HHS, those are the people who do HIPAA, this is what they are saying when an auditor comes in. Okay, and for those who've ever been involved with an audit, they don't come in and say, show me your penetration test. Okay, they come in and say, you have 10 business days, you'll get a certified letter, right? You have 10 business days to provide the following paperwork. Okay, and what the paperwork's always going to be is prove to us that you have written policies and procedures. Who is in charge? Did you have effective training, lines of communication, secure monitoring and auditing? Okay, is there disciplinary guidelines, and ultimately, did you track incidences? Now, the reason why I say this is so important is, ultimately, I'm going to explain that those 7 elements translate to 4 things: encryption, backup, secure messaging, and monitoring and auditing are mandated in the law. Okay, so you don't have to try to convince them why they need to do this. You just need to say, hey, well, 164-3B says you have no choice. I'm just giving you your options of whether or not to do solution A or solution B. One costs one costs something else. Now, to give you an illustration of why this is so telling, and I'm going to give some real life stories here. Okay, so one is a lost laptop. So there was a $2.7 million fine for Oregon Health and Science. Now, if you were to read the many pages of documentation on this, the issue was not about whether or not this laptop was encrypted or not. Okay, the argument, or let's say the defense by Oregon, was they had hired a very prominent security firm to do a complete security risk analysis every year. And they could say that they went back 6 years. By the way, the law says you got to be able to do it 6 years back. Okay, and they had a HIPAA compliant hosting service, and they had a HIPAA compliant electronic health records. Why did they get fined 2.7? Because the government said, well, wait a second. If you did the 6 required audits every year, you did a security risk assessment. That's great. So you did 2 of the 6. If you had done the other 4 correctly, you would have noticed that you have staff that takes equipment off-site on vacation. And in this particular case, the laptop was stolen out of a child's hands. So that was considered grossly negligent. Okay, if you had audited your administrative and your physical and or privacy components, you would have known that this was going on. You would have had a policy that said, for example, you can't take it, or a kid can't play with this by the pool. Okay. By the way, I will share an equal story, and we have a case study on our website, and if this will help you. Imperial Valley is about a 30-location healthcare provider in Southern California. They lost a laptop. It was unencrypted. Okay, we were still able to prove that they made a good faith effort because they had 32 sites, I believe. They had converted 26 of them. That laptop was stolen from the 27th site. There was only so much work that them and their MSP could do at one time. Okay, good faith effort. Malware. This is the other one I love. You know how many people I have this argument with? Well, I did a security risk assessment. I have policies, procedures, and training. Am I compliant? No. In this particular case, it was a malware issue, so they had to report it. Why they were fined, and it was a low fine because they were a nonprofit, because they had done a security risk assessment, but they had not done the other required audits, okay, the other, privacy administrative, okay. Two, because they hadn't done the other audits, their policies and procedures, which were store-bought, nothing wrong with store-bought policies and procedures, folks, okay, but they have to be modified to accurately reflect the business, and in this case, they did not. Strike three was they had a third-party external training service, which is very legitimate. Many of you may be working with some, okay? The problem was it wasn't effective. Why? This goes back to those 7 elements. It was done once a year, okay? And the problem with this particular firm was they had very high turnover, 30 to 40% turnover every year. So the government said, you would not have had this malware issue if you trained your staff on a regular ongoing basis, if you had proper policies and procedures, and you would have known that if you did all of the correct assessments. Lost smart device, and if you guys have been nodding off on me, I'm going to have you all pay attention here, okay? This $650,000 fine was to an MSP, okay? It was an IT firm out of Philadelphia, okay? Pretty silly reason to get fined $650,000. What they did is a tech was on site. He was doing some work. For whatever reason, he transferred something, he emailed something to his personal phone, okay? He later lost that smart device. Now, same thing. Why would they fine $650,000? It wasn't whether or not the device was encrypted, which is what we would all argue. The issue was, how come you did not audit your organization and know that administratively staff members could be on site and do this kind of thing? Okay, so that was considered negligence. All right, so you really have to make sure that you are looking at the holistic needs, and this is what I started this whole webinar with. Solve their problem, not their symptoms. Okay? If you said, well, I did encryption, that wouldn't have helped any of these fines would not have been solved with encryption or backup. It required proper HIPAA audits, okay, which justify all of your services. Okay. Visually, the best way to kind of show this to you folks is if you're doing just what I often hear people say, hey, we're fine, we're just doing HIPAA light. No such thing. Okay, you either satisfying the law, good faith effort, or you're not. So if you're just doing the security audits, security remediation efforts, maybe security policies, procedures, and training, although that is a noble thing, it is a very important part of helping practices be successful in today's world, but you are not making them HIPAA compliant. And my argument is you are leaving money on the table. Okay, you're not solving their problem. You are leaving yourself open for a competitor to come in and tell them. And like I said, guys, this isn't me being mean, but I speak at 30 different conferences a month. I do webinars. Okay, the majority of them are healthcare conferences, and they ask me to speak on cybersecurity. And this is the exact same talk track I'm giving to you guys. This is what the heads of the associations want me to educate their people on. Okay, how to better serve, how to better protect their patients. Now, so if you're doing it right, you would have done all 6 audits, you would have identified gaps, had remediation plans in writing. You would have now that, by the way, right there is a great opportunity because those gaps are where you guys come in, okay? 2 of the audits are security related. So all of those remediation plans, that's where the justification of your services comes up, okay? You do not have adequate encryption, backup, secure monitoring, or secure messaging. Boom, how are you going to solve it? Policies, procedures, and training, a little more, like I said earlier, they got to relate to, they have to relate to the actual way the client's organization works, okay? Things like keeping track of all the policies and procedures, individual employee attestations, okay? It's not good enough in today's world for you to say that there's an employee who sat in on a group training, okay? The government wants, and in this case, our belief is you need to have an actual specific attestation for each policy and procedure and training, and it needs to be done each year. Business associate management, hey, they got to have a contract. They need that technical due diligence. Why not be a part of that? Okay, it's a great opportunity for you to be stickier with your clients. Last part under the law, which relates back to your services, which is incident management. So what was a trouble ticket to you is an incident that they have to investigate and report, and vice versa. Okay, so there's a great opportunity for you to be much stickier in the way you help them solve their problems. Okay. So if you are doing it correctly, yes, this opens all sorts of doors for you. It allows you to get directly into additional offerings. And for example, if we talk a little bit about, let's say, Axient, there's a whole bunch of services that tie directly into what Axient does. Okay, so if you're, and like I said, the law is justifying these things for you. You do not need to be, you don't need to try to explain to them why they need, a particular type of technology. You can just say, look, law says you're negligent here. I'm going to solve that problem for you. Hey, Tom or Angus, I don't know if either of you guys want to talk a little about some of the Axient products that overlap here.
Well, Mark, this is Tom. I had a couple things, maybe Angus does too. My big thing was what you said in the last slide was leaving money on the table. My feeling is a few years ago, maybe you could afford to not do medical or only take a small piece of a medical practice. But now, with the way things are and the growth of it, and then, the service that your company brings, and you really need to. If you're an MSP and you're not doing medical or you only have pieces of medical networks, you need to jump in. You need to take advantage of this. You need to get educated, trained up with your people, and jump into this market because it's there. It's not going away. And you're probably not going to be that profitable as an MSP if you're not at least doing some of it or even make it your strong vertical focus.
Good.
Angus, did you have anything else?
So I just wanted to ask Mark, I think you talked about it's really important the kinds of businesses that you target to make sure that an MSP can see a viable business relative to compliance. And just wanted you to speak a little bit more about those demographics and targeting. And then could you also give some guidelines on how they could get started around that?
Okay. Actually, yeah. So I'll give a quick one now. So the majority of healthcare, 80%, 82% of it is small and mid-size. Okay. So they're, let's say they could be as small as a 10-person shop. Many of them are 50 to 100-person shops, maybe 200-person shops, 3 locations, 5 locations. And that, by the way, that whether it's a covered entity, which is an actual medical practice, right? So I would say, we, as the endorsed solution, for example, for the American Optometric Association, you can go to, let's say, there are many of the big difference in between. Like I said, I'm not beating up on dentists. It's just if you look at, let's say, the American Optometric Association, the AAO, or we've seen this with the oncology, dermatology, anesthesiology, they're saying point blank, a lot of the pain management, surgical, orthopedics, their national associations are mandating these folks become HIPAA compliant. Okay, they view it as a strategic differentiator. So these are the size client you're talking to, or you should be talking to, right? These are the people who they're big enough to care. They got money, right? But they're not big enough to really justify having true true internal security, advanced IT solutions. I will tell you, and I didn't kind of want to jump in there. Part of what you're seeing here, these are the services that Compliance Groups offers, right? And yes, as the endorsed solution, we have over 500,000 healthcare decision makers that have opted into our education series that for partners that are on our platform that have our seal of compliance, yeah, we give you leads. Right, we have a closed network where we absolutely are in the business of helping our over 70,000 clients find an MSP in their territory, because that's critical to what we think is the only way to do this correctly. Now, to give a kind of because you guys don't necessarily need to believe me, but let me give you a couple of and some of the folks that may have seen. Let's say we've done Paul Redding is a client of ours that's done some of the security roadshows with us. So Carlin Bradley, Paul Redding is a smaller MSP out of Tennessee. He was doing predominantly security work, and the concerns about whether or not to get into healthcare were kind of the same things that you guys were saying. Kind of like the idea, realized he had, I'd have to learn some more, extra stuff, maybe tool sets, etc. When he got involved with us, we were able to say, look, no. You do exactly what you do in security. We will give you the domain expertise and the tool sets to do the rest. Okay? And what he saw and hopefully that we can do this. If any of the folks on the call today are interested in finding out more about this, we put 20 new clients into his shop in the first 6 months he worked with us. Okay, if you think the average MSP that brings on 4 or 5 new clients a year, we were able to help him. He's became a national player. He was comfortable with things. Now, one of the things he did, not all of them became MSP managed service clients. About 60% of them took a one-shot security risk assessment support effort. About 60% of them turned into full-time MSPs. Okay, one of the things that's interesting and we have also got a lot of feedback from our MSP partners that utilizing a tool set like the Guard, which is what our product does, which is meant to be the tool that you use, your client use, and that the employees of your clients use, did increase great efficiencies for how you manage your clients. Okay, and in the case of Paul, he saw about a 20% increase in efficiency. Now, the next thing that comes up is the question is, well, they're cheap. I can't really make much more money. Although I don't want to go, this is about helping you guys see value and solution. I'd love to do a proper demo for you if you guys are interested. But what our most successful partners are doing is taking something from us that's $200-300 a month and marking it up to $1,200 to $2,000 per month under the premise is you are in healthcare. Which means because you are in healthcare, you must address all of these issues. You require special handling per the law, and that any MSP that is doing that, that is not charging you these fees, are not solving your problem. This is why the talk track, the value of solving their problem, not just their symptoms, can be very lucrative. We see other folks, what they're doing is they're just taking work from us, or let's say taking tool sets from us and marking it up 3x. But because it's HIPAA, it justifies your project work, and it justifies you to raise your monthly MRR rates, right? Because you can legitimately say, per the law, per a third party, you are failing in these arenas, and therefore need to have more. Okay. Now, all right. So we are to questions. Folks, start sending some questions in. While I'm getting those questions, let me say a couple of things. We have a free security and compliance checklist. It's a great thing for you to download. It's meant for either you to look at yourself, or it's a great tool to walk into your client and say, look, hey, you are failing at this. You do not have, answer these 5 questions. If you can't, then I can guarantee you, or I can pretty much advise you, you're not HIPAA compliant. Tom or Angus, did you guys have anything else? And guys, feel good. Listen, post questions, folks. We're here to answer them for you.
And as Mark, this is Angus, and as Mark said earlier, of course, an MSP has to look at their own HIPAA compliance as they go forward with these types of services. So from the Axient eFolder side, we can actually support you with a business associate agreement, or BAA, relative to any MSPs that are documented to be eligible for HIPAA compliance. And then in addition to that, of course, through our cloud services, we support the backup and disaster recovery plan that'll protect, your electronic protected health information as well. So those are some of the key elements that we can provide from the Axient eFolder side to help MSPs go to market with HIPAA compliance and supporting this overall compliance value proposition.
Good. One question that came in. Please go ahead. I'm sorry, Tom.
Angus, I don't remember exactly how many years, but HIPAA compliance for Axient eFolder is by no means a new thing either. We've been doing this for a very long time and supporting our partners that have networks that need to be HIPAA compliant.
Yep, exactly. And
I think it's something like Mark, 8 years or something like that.
Yeah. 6 years back. Well, or at least what the law requires. I'm sorry.
6 years.
So we got a question. The question was, would a pest control company that has medical clients be required to be compliant? The answer is no, and here's why. When that pest control organization is going through a medical office, there is no reason that they should be coming in contact with PCI, okay, or PHI, I'm sorry, protected health information. Now, why a billing firm does, okay, is because the role that a billing company provides is doing something for a doctor's office that they would have done themselves where PHI is involved. So, for example, I've heard this argument from many MSPs. Well, I'm not touching PHI. Well, I have a question. You logged in to help them resolve a problem on their laptop. You logged in remotely, and one of the things you're doing is testing their EHR, their access. They had login problems. Guess what? You're not looking at PHI. Okay. And by the way, it also has to do with storage, right? Are you storing or transmitting anything that might have PHI in it? This is why, for example, often accountants will say, well, we don't have to be HIPAA compliant. Well, the problem is you're getting a QuickBooks feed every month. And guess what? If you open up that QuickBooks feed, you're going to see it as patient information in it. It's going to say this patient had which procedure and what they paid for it. Okay. So it is actually very, it is important that you understand kind of all those things. All right, so hang on. So OCR wall of shame, how much of a good target group is that for us to go after in terms of marketing, i.e. they're out of business in the near future or can they sustain the damage? Okay, so the OCR wall of shame, just because they're on it doesn't mean that they're going to get fined and be shut down, okay? It means that they're going to be asked to prove their good faith effort, okay? What I would say is, candidly for me, I would not. You might want to get involved with that because you can help them remediate the gaps that they've identified. I'm a little gun shy because if they're in the middle of an audit, chances are it's like a drowning person, right? They're going to pull on to you to try to save themselves. A much better marketing tool, and if I can be a little bit on the plugging side of Compliancy Group, if you work with us, because of our relationship in healthcare, we actually give you the target lists, the webinars, the checklist call to action campaigns, and the list of names in your territory that we know that are active. Okay, that's probably better hunting. Okay. Also, if you have, let's say, if there's an accounting society in your town, if there is a independent physicians association, often those folks are looking for people to speak. Right? They really want someone to talk about cybersecurity, for example, and educate their members. In our case, we actually have built what's called continuing education classes. So it's a webinar like this where we're talking about a specific issue. We don't talk about product. We're just educating. So those are great tools to get you entrees into those folks. Wall of shame, I'd be a little bit more careful about, right? Because if they're in trouble, they're in trouble, right? Let's see, what other kind of questions we got? We got to check out that one. Okay. What do I do if my client has not asked me to sign a BA agreement? Okay, here's the deal. A BA agreement reduces your liability. Okay, failing to have a business associate agreement, even though it's the responsibility of your client to have asked you for one, without it, what happens is when there is a breach, notice I didn't say if, it says when there is a breach or incident, the government's just going to turn around and say, as far as we're concerned, you're both screwed. Okay? If you have a BA agreement, what a good business associate agreement says is we both understood that we fall under a federal law called HIPAA. I'm responsible for what I do. You're responsible for what you do, i.e., they cannot pin their failure to be HIPAA compliant on you, and nor can you pin your failure to be HIPAA compliant on them. So a BA agreement is actually an incredible, now, by the way, some people mix all sorts of crazy things into a BA agreement. Okay, so make sure you read it or have a lawyer read it. But a good BA agreement actually reduces your liability because it says, hey, I'm only responsible for what I do. Right. And I realize, a lot of the security folks are concerned, well, yeah, but I advise them to put in whatever technology. You advise them to put in technology. Okay. That has nothing to do with HIPAA compliance. Okay. HIPAA compliance is your ability to show your good faith effort and the way you ran your organization. It's not the tech. All right, so we are coming up. We've been at this for a couple of minutes now. Anybody have any additional questions? If not, we really appreciate one. Thank you so much for Axian for sponsoring this, and all you folks that took time out of your busy day to join us.
Yeah, and Mark, just wanted to say thank you for helping us put this together and looking to do some more work together in the future. These programs are very important to me. At MSP Ignition, I'm always looking for what's best for MSPs out there.
No, please. And other topics, folks, for if you're trying to sway the healthcare market, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. And Tom, perhaps this is another one of the events we can do together. There are many true positives that you can explain to your clients by being compliant and secure. Okay, so for example, there's statistics about how you can, for example, being HIPAA compliant correlates to greater patient loyalty. Having, for example, being able to proudly say you are HIPAA compliant and secure on your website can increase conversion by 17%. Employee satisfaction. There's a lot of benefits. This isn't just about satisfying the law. There's hardcore benefits in helping these folks solve this problem that I would love to see every one of the MSPs benefit from. One of the questions is costs. Hey, folks, I'd love to give you a demo. Today we're about education here, so I don't necessarily want to get into the features and functions of our product. If you're interested, that's feel free to reach out to me via email. It is not particularly expensive. I think you would be pleasantly surprised. So please reach out to both Tom or I on how you can work with Axient or how you can work with Compliance Group.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
All right, everybody. Have an awesome day. Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it. And Tom and Angus, thank you.
Thank you, too. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.